You may be looking at this and thinking, wait, I thought I clicked on a video about cheese. This is a planet. What's going on? Wait, did they just find aliens? Is this the planet where the Tic Tac UFO came from? It's a UAP, not a UFO, and no. You were right the first time. This is about cheese. This planet is actually a mouth-watering, delicious French cheese, and to be perfectly honest, it pairs quite nicely with beer, wine, or whiskey. And while no, this isn't a real planet, it really is inhabited by tiny little aliens. Today we're going to explore Mimolette cheese. But before we jump in, and if you're feeling fancy, be sure to subscribe to the channel and let me know what other cheeses you would like to explore. Over the years, I've posted many times about Mimolette on Instagram. Let me just say this much at the top. Before we start this journey, this is a delicious cheese. I'm telling you this now because what you're about to see may make what I just said completely unbelievable. Okay? Again, just remember, delicious fromage, yum yum yum. Don't forget that later on. And with that disclaimer, let's go on this food journey. The origins of Mimolette aren't exactly clear, but somewhere in the 17th century is when Louis XIV ruled France. And under the Sun King's rule, the French ceased importing cheese from other countries, specifically for the sake of this story, the Netherlands. You might be wondering, with all that cheese France produces, why would they need even more cheese? Well, let's just say when you got a habit, you gotta keep that party going. France stopped importing because of mercantilism. Mercantilism was an economic system where France put strong restrictions on the import of goods. Jean-Baptiste Colbert, who I'm pretty sure is no relation to Stephen Colbert, or Jean-Baptiste for that matter, even though it's spelled different, he was the Minister of Finance and was the main promoter of mercantilism. With Colbert, the French government became very not into importing goods. Since the people of northern France, who are used to getting their Edam cheese, weren't able to get any on their own now, they got creative and began producing their own version of an Edam-style cheese, hence the genesis of Mimolette. Now, if you're looking at Mimolette and Edam side by side, you wonder, was this an artist's interpretation? Was it inspired by Edam? Was it a happy accident? Beyond their appearances, what are some of the similarities? Well, both come in a sphere-like shape. Mimolette is more shaped like a curling stone that a Canadian would love. Both use cow's milk that's pasteurized. Both use animal rennet. Both cheeses are brined. Both cheeses are aged from 3 months to up to a year. Mimolette a little bit more, sometimes 24 months or more. One big difference comes to the rind. Edam, like its Dutch cousin Gouda, is wrapped in wax. Mimolette is pretty unique, which we'll get to in a minute. Edam's flavors are in the spectrum to a Mimolette, but to me, lands a little bit closer to a Gouda. While Goudas tend to have more of a toffee-flavored note, Edam starts off a little bit sweeter, almost like a butterscotch. It kind of reminds me of a lighter, milkier version of a Werther's candy. You know, the one that old people love. But the rest of the cheese is nice and salty and at times feels more like a traditional farmhouse Gouda. The most intriguing thing about Mimolette is, without a doubt, the relationship between the cheese's rind and the cheese mites. Let's take a look. With the naked eye, you're definitely not going to see anything that's necessarily unusual, except for the appearance of the rind. It's craggly. You might take a quick look at it and mistake it for a cantaloupe or a Civil War cannonball that someone found on the bottom of a river. But all those tiny little holes are an indicator that there's something going on in here. We're going to go into that big hole right there, which in reality is actually a fairly tiny hole. So this is about a ½ inch wide, and you can see smaller than a dime. This is where things are gonna get pretty funky. This is inside the rind. Just to give you perspective, what you're seeing is less than an inch deep. Take a look around, seems normal, right? And hey, looks kinda cool, like we're in some kind of SpongeBob SquarePants set backdrop. But keep looking. No, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. Things are moving around in here. This reminds me of the movie Aliens when the Marines are in the reactor core.
Look, I'm telling you, there's something moving and it ain't us.
Like Aliens, this tiny little cave is alive. There's one. Oh, there's another. Well, look at that. Oh, hey, you. And when you speed up the footage, yeah, it becomes way more apparent. This is Mimolette's great secret. These are the mighty mites. And just for perspective, when I was shooting this, I couldn't see these things by just looking at the cheese. It wasn't until I got the footage on a much larger screen where things became apparent. Even when you open up this cheese, which this one's been aged about 22 months, we can zoom in on the side of the rind, and this area is about an 1/8 inch wide. When we pop in, yeah, there they are. The tiny dairy demons are in there too. Look at them, you little bastards. Get out of my cheese. Get on, get. And while it's hard to say this while you're looking at this living wall of nastiness, don't let this ruin your appetite. I'll emphasize again that this is a delicious cheese, but I'm not going to lie to you. Watching this is both fascinating and yeah, it's pretty gross, especially the fact that it hasn't stopped me from eating it. These creepy microscopic mites are arachnids and related to spiders. Almost impossible to see with the naked eye, they are present everywhere in Mimolet's rind. They thrive in damp and cool environments, and hey, this is the same type of conditions you would age a cheese in. Famous fromages like Parmesan or Comte are susceptible to cheese mite infestation. Cheesemakers take different measures to deter these cheese mites. For example, the rind of a Parmesan is oiled and traditional cheddars are wrapped in cloth. So while most producers will brush or wash these mites off, Mimolette makers really like having these little critters around. Their gnawing at the rind help aerate the cheese, which shapes the flavor. While there are many different types of mites, and there are other cheeses that use different breeds of mites, Mimolette itself uses the flower mite variety on their cheese. At 1 to 2 months, producers will take a ball of Mimolette to a special chamber where it is inoculated with cheese mites. These mites diligently burrow and nibble their way into the cheese's rind. But they do have to monitor these mites. If left unchecked, they can render a wheel inedible. The presence of mites can be detected by a fine brownish dust that accumulates on the cheese's surface. This dust is a combination of living and dead mites, mite excretion, and cheese debris. Yeah, that sounds like the worst ad tagline ever. Having foodie spiders in your cheese may sound unappetizing, but I'm going to be straight with you. They are harmless. And yes, if you've had this cheese, you've probably ingested a mite or two. But let me emphasize this, you do not need to eat the rind on this cheese. Yeah, throw that bitch in the trash. Not surprisingly, Mimolette has faced challenges in the United States. The FDA banned it in 2013 due to concerns of those plucky little mites. Never mind the fact that the cheese has been made for centuries, but the FDA suddenly classified the mites as an allergen. Thankfully, the ban on Mimolette ended in 2015. Really, once you get past the whole "there's tiny creatures in my food," Mimolette is a pretty straightforward cheese. Produced in Lille, France, near the Dutch-Belgian border, its only other ingredients are pasteurized cow's milk, annatto, salt, animal rennet, and cheese cultures. One ingredient, annatto, is what gives Mimolette its color. You can find annatto in many different foods, but of course in many different cheeses as well, including cheddars, goudas, and in some gruyères. Annatto comes from the seeds of the achiote shrub, which is typically found in Central and South America. They'll take seeds and grind them up and use it as natural food coloring. So yeah, no yellow dye number 5 for this fromage. Mimolette is all naturel. In powder form, annatto has a pretty bland taste, maybe a slight hint of nuttiness. But while subtle in flavor, annatto does have some health benefits. It helps reduce inflammation, it's filled with antioxidants, it's heart healthy, and has anti-cancer components. See, with this cheese, you take the good, you take the bad, and you may take them both, and there you'll have the facts of life. Now, to follow up on what I said at the top, this cheese is really enjoyable, and believe it or not, it's a very easy cheese to eat. My dog really loves it, and she has a pretty sharp palate too. It's nutty, salty, and the tastes really stick to the jowls. You can just sit in front of the TV and eat this thing all day long by itself. For me, the more aged the Mimolette, the better, and that's where you'll find those flavors really intensify. And when tasting this cheese or any other cheese, you want to let it sit out at room temperature for about 30 minutes before you eat it. And while most cheeses will soften out a bit, Mimolette is pretty sturdy. You're just going to get chewy bites all day long with this one. This is a great cheese by itself, and you can also pair it. With wine, I recommend a Pinot Noir or a Gamay. Whiskey, try something on the woody or softly sweet side. This 2 Stacks Irish whiskey works just right. Beer, if you go light, try a Pilsner, and if you go heavy, this Belgian triple Carmelate is great. And for chocolate, the milkier the chocolate, the better. And you don't have to overthink it. You could go to CVS and get a Tony's Chocolonely, and it works great. And if you want to add some texture on your macaroni and cheese, you can grate some on top. I've also grated Mimolette on popcorn, and while a sharp cheddar is more satisfying, it is a delicious and unique way to up your popcorn game. You might be asking yourself, where in God's green earth can I actually find this funky cheese? In a medieval castle, a burned ward at a hospital, Area 51? Of course you can find this at your local cheese shop, but surprisingly I found Mimolette at Kroger's. Well, most in the Midwest would have Kroger's, but other parts of the country might have Ralph's, Dillon's, or Smith's. But the reason that happened is that the mighty Kroger Corporation bought Murray's Cheese a few years back. Based out of New York City, Murray's was one of the first big American distributors of fine European cheeses since the early 90s, getting really solid quality fromages from Italy, Spain, and of course, France. They even turned their basement into a cheese cave where they can age some of their cheeses. In 2017, Kroger even bought the building housing Murray's flagship store. So yeah, even if you live in a city or town that doesn't have a fancy cheese shop, the chain grocery store in your hood might actually have it. In fact, I found Mimolette in Toledo, Ohio. If you can find it in Toledo, Ohio, the world is your oyster. And worth noting, this is a popular cheese for the reasons that should be obvious now around Halloween. So what do you think? Mimolette lover or willing to try? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to watch more videos from Come to Cheesus on the Crisp Whisk channel.